Welcome to the future. Technologies and innovations that sculpt our industry.
This episode brought to you by Goodhart Willcox, publisher of Modern Refrigeration and Air Conditioning. Learn more at g-w.com.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us once again on Did You Know, the ESCO HVAC podcast. So today we're spending time with Dan Bracciano, author of Modern Refrigeration, Air Conditioning, published by Goodhart Willcox, one of the Bibles of the industry. It's the book that I grew up with, learning from. I used to use a lot of content when I was doing my industrial HVAC classes. And Dan, thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Thanks for having me.
So we've had a couple conversations about this refrigerant transition, and there's so many things that we can talk about. And it's just a good opportunity for us to dive a little bit deeper into what this transition looks like, why the refrigerants are actually going to be a little bit different especially when we talk about like replacement refrigerants. So let's talk about the transition from like R12 and R32 into R410, and that'll give us like a foundation of why things are going to be a little bit different as we move from 410 into R454B and R32.
Yeah, that's a good place to start. Those that were around like myself in the R12, R22 phase out, that was a phase out. That was going cold turkey, where the EPA
100%.
basically said, can't manufacture it. It doesn't exist anymore. Existing stocks can be utilized, but it was a pretty radical way to do it. What they're doing now is a phase down. So all the way out till 2037, HFCs like 410A will still be available, will still be out there for purchase, for service. The big thing that's going to be changing, and there is a bit of a sense of urgency, is the manufacture of units is going to stop after January 1. So whatever's out there is going to be it as far as units go.
And if you think about like that R22 transition, we at least had dry charge outdoor units. So during that transition, we still had units that could be installed and use our choice of refrigerant on installation. And we will not have that with this change. I mean, it is a phase out of refrigerant, but it is a very abrupt change of equipment. So a lot of manufacturers have already stopped the production of some of their R410A product lines, switched over to R32. So we're going to have like a transition period that's very different than things that we've experienced in the past.
Yes, essentially what the EPA has done is said in air conditioning equipment, you have to have a GWP, global warming potential, less than 700. For stationary equipment like domestic refrigerators, ice makers, it's 150 GWP.
Right.
So that is going to drastically affect what equipment is coming in. And as we were talking the other day, educators, schools, community colleges, a lot of them don't have the equipment right now on site, and they don't have the tools to train their students. So that's really going to have to ramp up over the next year, because by the end of next year, 2025, January 1, you're no longer going to be able to install units with HFCs, whether that's 410A or 422B or 407C. They're just not going to be available. It's not just 410A. So any of the HFCs that are out there today, they have GWPs in the 1200s, 1700s. Nothing will be manufactured less than 700 or 150. So that's going to be a drastic change in the industry that really needs to get addressed this year. I've been working with Daikin and other manufacturers and Fieldpiece and Navtech to try to get the word out to different community colleges, at least in my area where I can visit, and get them equipment as soon as they can, make them aware, have them put it in their budgets, make sure that they get it in and they get the students learning the new refrigerants.
Yeah, because for those that don't understand what this transition is for equipment, right, that January 1st of 2025 deadline Originally, that was going to be it. Like you couldn't even install them after that. That was ratified. We were able to add an additional 12-month sell-through so the distributors could actually get rid of the rest of their stock. But that's already starting to diminish in many of our distributors. So we already have distributors that are starting to run out of their R410A supplies and are starting to ship out R32 units. Now, that's not all distributors or manufacturers, but that is definitely some that I've witnessed here in my area. So that by the time we reach that January 1st of 2025, our contractors are going to be receiving a lot of R32 and R454B equipment. That's why we have this sense of emergency to make sure that the industry is aware that this is not something that is coming. This is not like a transition that's going to happen in the future. It's already began. And as educators, we absolutely have to start making these connections and getting this equipment into our classrooms, getting our budgets prepared for that, because some of the prices of equipment are going up because we're adding mitigation controls to many of our systems. And so we need to have this technology in the classrooms now so that we can be preparing not just our current students, but our current workforce, because this is going to be new to most of our industry. So we have an entire industry that is going to need to have some training and awareness in a very short window of time.
Yeah, to your point, the final rulemaking by the EPA has taken well over a year. The good news is this time around, industry being ESCO, ACCA, ASHRAE, AHR, a lot of the trade organizations have been able to push back against the EPA's rules. They had some really wild stuff in there, like QR codes for refrigerant cylinders that was tossed out.
Yeah.
Not being able to just throw out a refrigerant cylinder. You had to return it to a recycler.
Yeah,
That
recover
got
the
thrown
heel.
out. So
Mhm.
they
We
made
were
some huge impact, and the biggest one is the sell down. So you get an extra year here, so that anything that's in stock can at least get sold. Distributors aren't and contractors aren't stuck with units that they legally cannot install. So you've got a year to basically purge everything out of the system. But after that, like you said, next January is kind of like D-Day. It's a no-no. So you're not going to be able to sell them. You're not going to be able to install them. And we've got to get our students, our educators up to speed by next year. So we've got 1 year to go.
Yeah, exactly. And, so this is for our residential and light commercial air conditioning and heat pumps. Now, there are some extended dates for things like our VRV, VRF products, and that all comes out of the technology transition rule. So what we are here addressing today is our residential and light commercial industry, because they are being affected very quickly. And it's not just our industry, it's every industry that works with refrigerants. If we look at the automotive industry, it's model year 25 that they had to be at their 150 GWP. So all the vehicles that were being manufactured with a model year of 25 had to meet their new requirements. So they've already transitioned over to refrigerants like R1234YF. So there's a lot of education and a lot of impact that's happening across many different sectors, many different industries right now.
I also want to just make sure that everybody doesn't get all freaked out, because the automotive is a good example, right? Technically, the U.S. was in what was called the Kigali Agreement, the Montreal Protocol that started this whole process. And the Europeans were the first to adopt it. The United States pulled out of it about 6 years ago, and said, we're not going to do it. And then the new administration came in and said, okay, we're back into the Kigali Agreement, and we're going to phase down our HFCs. Europe has already started that like 5 years ago. The automotive industry started using HFO 1234YF back in 2011. So it's been in your vehicles for a long time. And the service
Yeah.
techs have been working with it for a long time. The nice thing about the HFOs, and I really like 1234YF, if you laid the pH chart over an R12 chart, or 134A chart, I should say, it's almost line to line. So the pressures and temperatures that you're working with are very similar. The same thing goes with 454B over 410A. And
Yeah.
so these refrigerants are going to be very similar to what you've been working with. The only big difference is they're, quote, mildly flammable. And with that said, they've been in your vehicle under hood for quite a
Some
while
time.
now,
Yeah, like
and there's
2016 Dodge Ram. It's
yeah, yeah, oh yeah,
2016, and it's a
yeah,
1234YF.
yeah. So it's not something to be afraid of. If anything, the previous transition put all sorts of refrigerants out there. The 400 series, the 500 series. You had to worry about Clyde and all these different blends, azeotropic blends, zeotropic blends. It, Getting down to HFOs and on the small unit side, we're going to be looking at propane. I mean, that's just
Hmm.
the way it is.
R290.
R290.
Hmm.
It's just a different animal to work with. With that said, the HFOs are going to be very similar in your evacuation, fill, charge. Everything is going to be very similar to what we've been dealing with in the air conditioning industry with 410A. So I don't want to sound an alarm. This is not going to be that dramatic. It's going to be different, but it's not going to be something to be afraid of. We just need to get the word out there that, there is a deadline. We got to start transitioning. Resistance is futile, and just get it done.
I think I'm going to have to do a podcast or a social post. Maybe this is the one. Resistance is futile. It really is. It's here. And not only is it coming through the Kigali Amendment, it's coming through the AIM Act as well. So the entire phase down was duplicated in the AIM Act. So now we have a bipartisan commitment. We have a Republican president. We have a Democratic president on two different things. So now we have an international treaty as well as an act of Congress, right? So we're not going to change this. Even if we went after one, it would probably take as long to counteract it as what it would the entire phase down. It would take a decade.
Yep.
And by that
Yep.
point, we would almost be at the end of this phase down. So it is here. It is very important. You and I mentioned, we sometimes feel like we're bell ringing in the industry going, hello, is anyone listening? Because you have to. It's not that you need to, you have to know what is happening around you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the big thing is most instructors have to, get with their management or their board, get the funding set up. They've got a perfect excuse to get some new units. The way I frame it with some of the guys that I've been talking with is this is like a golden opportunity to replace some of the old units you've got, because you need to start training your students by next year or sooner, actually, as soon as possible. So if they tell you, well, we don't have the funds, we don't have the budget, you say, well, then our guys are not going to be prepared in the field. So you've got a pretty good business case to get some new units. And like I said, a lot of the manufacturers realize this, and they're cutting deals, and they're willing to work with the different schools to get the units in their hands as quickly as possible so that they can get up to speed and start training the students. So I look at it once again as a positive thing. This is going to get people new equipment. The training is going to be they're going to redo Section 608 too. So the training is going to be a little more accurate, and it's best practices. Same best practices that we use today. The big difference is you're going to have new vacuum pumps, new gauge sets with the new refrigerants on them, or if you've got an app, then you just look to the app and you're good there. So it shouldn't be all that dramatic for people that are in the industry that follow the current best practices anyway.
That's exactly right. You made a great point about updating the equipment in our labs, because you're right. We've been working with the same single stage equipment for 50 plus years. We introduced two stage maybe 25 or 30 years ago. And so now that we're making transitions, we've also had manufacturers making equipment transitions, bringing a lot more inverters into the design of things. And so now we have the opportunity to go to our administration and go, did you know that our entire industry is going through a transition that has already began? I need to have some new equipment in the classroom. I need to have some updated curriculum. I need to make sure that I've got certifications that match this. And so I need to address this change, this drastic change in the industry then I need to make you aware that we are going through this and that our program is going to need some administrative assistance. And yeah, I don't think there's ever been as good of a time to ask for all this as there is right now.
Yeah, that's why one of the local schools here, community college, I've been working with them, and I told them this is a golden opportunity because they desperately would love to get some new equipment and some new
Mhm.
tools. So I'm helping them put together the business case to get inverter-driven heat pumps with R32. So
It's perfect.
you
Yeah,
know,
you're hitting all of the check boxes all at once. And now that we've got the Department of Energy really starting to focus on inverter driven, they call them cold climate heat pumps or high performance heat pumps, why not make this entire transition right now, be able to upskill the industry? Because if we do that and we have night classes for adults, now you have an opportunity for your current workforce to come back into their school looking for updated education. I mean, it is a win-win for everyone. If done right, there's not enough instructors to handle the influx of students and technicians looking for education.
yeah, yeah, it's. I think you're going to see enrollment increase, and once the new 608, people are going to have to go back and study up on the new equipment. To your point, the cold weather heat pumps. I mean, that the DOE's program has been extremely successful, and you're
Hmm.
seeing applications. I was originally from Michigan, and we never thought of heat pumps because it was too cold, and now you've got heat
Right.
pumps operating in Quebec and Montreal and
Yeah.
northern Canada.
Successfully.
So yeah, so the days of heat pumps being a southern area only are over, long over, and now you're going to see them with 454B. You're going to see them with R32. So that's the future right there. And I would advise anybody that's looking to get new equipment to focus in on that because
Hmm.
the days of just installing a residential air conditioner, you might as well throw in a heat pump because it's going to be much more efficient than whatever you're replacing. Anyway,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if I'm a educational institute, it is the prime opportunity to start looking at state funding because the Inflation Reduction Act has also provided training funds, right, distributed through the states, and this is really what it's focused on. They're focused on the technology, right? Upskilling the industry for new technology. And so if we're doing that at once, we're bringing in the new technology with the new refrigerants, with the new curriculum, with the new certifications. By the way, I'd like to throw a quick plug in while we're talking about that. The HVAC Excellence Professional Level Heat Pump Installer Certification, the exam has been updated and has been approved by the Department of Energy for the Energy Skilled program. We're working with our employment readies right now as well. So it's the entire industry making strides forward and providing you as the industry with the resources. Now we just have to take the initiative to go after all of these resources and opportunities.
yeah, I agree totally. There's funds out there, state funds um, that you can tap into, and once again, this should be viewed as an opportunity to upgrade your classes, upgrade your equipment, and embrace the transition because, like I said, resistance is futile.
Absolutely. Let's spend a little bit of time, if you don't mind, talking about some of the refrigerants. You have spent a lot of research time looking at the refrigerants that we're going through, refrigerants that we're moving away from. Let's talk about some of these primary ones. We talk about this that is happening in residential, like commercial, with the R410A, basically the HFC phase down, and the R32 and R454B that we're going to be seeing. Are there other industries that you're seeing that are going through significant changes as well, or other refrigerants that are going through transitions?
Yeah, I think you're going to see a lot more CO2 used,
Mm,
and once again, that's been around forever.
over 100
Um,
years.
yeah, since the 1850s, some of the first refrigerant systems were CO2 and ammonia, and ammonia has been
Mhm.
around since 1800s also.
Yeah, that's right.
So obviously, there's experience out there in those systems. I think you're going to see more of that. The question becomes, when does the EPA stop? Right now they're taking it down to 700 for residential, 150 for small self-contained units. Will they stop there? History has probably shown that no. If they
That's going to
can
continue.
take it lower, they'll take it lower and lower and lower.
right.
First it was ozone depletion factor, and now it's GWP. So I think we'd be kidding ourselves if we thought that this is going to be the last, go around. If the Europeans or somebody else internationally comes up with something lower, they're going to go lower. But with that said, you can't get much lower than some of the HFOs. So
I agree.
when you look at a GWP of 1 for 1234YF, for example, the 1234ZE, those you're just not going to get any lower, right? CO2 is 0, or a GWP of 1. So you're not going to get lower than 1. Are they going to stay at 700? And probably not. The good news is propane, the hydrocarbons are 3, 5 in that area. And they're going to be out there. So our 290 is already out there. I think you were saying at ASHRAE you saw a 290 heat pump. So with a secondary loop. So there's going to be some creative things out there, secondary loops where you're using hydrocarbons like propane, R290. But eventually, I think the refrigerant industry has been extremely creative in being able to change and adapt every time too. So yeah, I'd like to do a shout out to our refrigerant companies, like Arkema, Honeywell. They've just done an amazing job. Every time the EPA has set a new threshold for us, they've come out with refrigerants really quickly and validated them and got them into the field. And like I was saying earlier, when you take a look at some of these HFOs, pressure temperature charts are very similar to refrigerants we've used before. So I think they've put us in a really good position with some really good products that are not that dramatically different than what we've been working with, and frankly have less glide than some of the stuff that we were working with in the past. So it's really quite amazing how quickly they can change and adapt and provide these refrigerants for our industry.
Yeah, we think about the amount of research that has went into creating these. I made a post here a while back about the periodic table of refrigerants showing that we really only work with 4 elements, right? Hydrogen, carbon, fluorine, and chlorine. And the chemical manufacturers, refrigerant manufacturers, that's really about all they have to work with. So they have to be very creative. They have to be forward thinking and being prepared, years ahead of time. We're talking a decade of research that has went in or more with our HFOs before they were even introduced into the industry. And so going forward, we're going to see a lot of our HFO refrigerants. We are going to see some of our HC refrigerants. But it really is an important time in our industry. I don't mind ringing this bell because it is going to be well worth it. So I praise you for joining me in this effort to educate the industry and bring the awareness to the fact that this next decade for our industry is going to be very crucial. This next year is going to be the most important piece of all of it. And we all have our duties to be prepared. So, Mr. Bracciano, tell us a little bit about the current version of modern refrigeration air conditioning, when we can expect the next revision coming out, and ways that we can connect with you or with Goodhart Willcox.
Well, we're in our 23rd edition, and modern refrigeration and air conditioning was originally modern gas and electric refrigeration, and it started in 1937, so before World War II.
Yeah.
Literally the first book in the industry on the topic. And we've revised it about every 4 years since then. We just recently came out with the 23rd edition, 91 years in the making.
Man, that's fantastic.
But we're continuously revising it. As you know, like with this refrigerant transition, the industry's continuously changing, so it's got to be continually updated. So it's a a project of my passion that I've been doing my whole life. I originally started in the field and then became an author, and I enjoy working on it. And the latest edition, we've got all the AIM Act and all the Kigali Agreement and the phase down of HFCs. All that's in there. All the A2L information's in there. So we keep it up to date nonstop. And then throughout the revision process, between the major revisions, we're always updating the text when a new printing comes out. So it's a continuous job. It never ends.
Yeah. Continual improvements on a wonderful asset to our industry.
Well, thank you.
And so ways that we can connect with Goodhart Wilcox?
You can visit the GW website. And once again, we're always at the ESCO show. So we'll be there in February, I think it is.
In March.
March in Las Vegas. So just stop by the booth, say hi. I'll always have a stack of cards, and I encourage people to come to the booth and meet me personally, because I'm usually there. And as I was explaining to you before, we have a list of reviewers, about 30 industry professionals, everything from refrigerant to equipment manufacturers, provide input into the book. Not just a couple of people write it, but I like to think of it as a team of about 30 people.
Wow.
Most of them are educators in the field, and technicians, friends of mine. So we get together usually once a year and go over things. We now started doing web meetings, etc. But I'm always open for additional reviewers and help, and so it's a team effort. Like I said earlier to you the other day, nobody's a quote expert in everything that's in a 1,400-page book. So it's a lot of material. It's a lot of different areas, and it takes a lot of people to keep it up to date and continuously improvement.
Yeah, I can absolutely understand that. Well, I sure appreciate you joining us today. I will be definitely seeing you at the National HVACR Education Conference. I will be there with my 23rd edition of Modern Refrigeration and Air Conditioning, and hopefully I can get an author signature inside of that.
Oh, absolutely. Not a problem.
Well, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you being here, and we will see you all soon on Did You Know, the ESCO HVAC show. And we thank you for joining the podcast.